Thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier, here with you today. We're going to be talking about something that's very interesting and not really being spoken about by the news media in America: the international policy under the Biden administration. Now, during the 2020 election and the primaries, we heard nothing about international policy. It's a very important subject, especially when we look at the advances that were made under the Trump administration to increase world peace, especially in the Middle East, with 4 unprecedented peace deals between Israel and several of the nations in the Middle East. So how will the Biden administration affect that? Will the Biden administration bring America into more conflict, more fighting, more soldiers being sent overseas? Or will it reduce these things? Will it make the world more peaceful? We're going to try and address part of that today. Now, if this is the first time that you've seen the channel, we do long-form political commentary here. And every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do a live stream with you, talking to you via YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook, as long as the internet overlords allow, where you're able to send us your comments, your thoughts, and your calls to talk about the issues that affect all of us, because we support the First Amendment. We hope to see you on 2:30 Eastern Standard Time on Sunday to join us in our live stream. Now, as for today, talking about the international policy of the United States, we don't know what that is. Joe Biden has made no true statement on what international policy under his administration will be. And therefore, Americans are somewhat lost. The news media has ignored that while focusing on the executive orders, the many, many executive orders of Joe Biden and his attempt to return to the Obama era. We have no idea if that includes international policy, especially in regards to the Middle East, in dealing with Iran, Syria, and several of the other nations in conflict at that time, Iraq as well. But we're going to try and understand where the Biden administration seems to be headed at this time. To do that, we have to understand what was the Obama administration international policy. It was something that was very confused, something that was not very clear at all. In fact, if we take a look, going back to, and this is in August of 2013, the Obama administration at the time was dealing with Syria and the Syrian internal conflict, their civil war. And President Obama, with the support of Joe Biden, then vice president, were against the Assad regime in that civil war. And that brought up the question, what is the purpose of the attack against Syria? What is President Obama trying to gain in trying to depose the Assad regime? And we stated at the time, quote, attacking a sovereign nation, under internal conflict or not, never just ends with the last bomb going off. There are consequences that continue long after. The U.S. relationship with Russia and the other Middle East nations will be affected. Considering the lack of support from critical allies, England and Germany, and the potential of unilateral action, all consequences will lie solely on the U.S. Is there any contingency for how, say, Iran or Hezbollah or China may react? Will this impede the use or production of future chemical weapons by Syria or any other nation? Does this signal a U.S. willingness to attack other nations with chemical weapons stores? And if so, how does the U.S. justify the stores of chemical weapons that we have? At this time, in 2013, no plan, coherent or otherwise, has been offered to address any of these concerns. In fact, beyond the act of aggression, no other forward-looking proposal has been made. The ramifications of this range from the mundane to the extreme. If the current Assad regime wins the internal Syrian conflict, the U.S. will have created an enemy that will remember what we did in their difficult time. If rebel factions win, many are aligned with organizations and nations that outright hate America. Even if those factions of rebels are not the clear winner, Syria will become a nation akin to Libya, Egypt, and others that are torn by internal power plays and vacuums, increasing Middle East instability. Again, this was all stated in 2003 under the claims the United States was entering into the Syrian conflict to defeat ISIS, to defeat al-Qaeda, and to punish the Syrian regime for using chemical weapons against its own people. This has not been resolved and continues to be a conflict ongoing at this time, with the intervention of both China and Russia, as well as Iran, in this conflict, each supporting various different factions to gain, hopefully, to gain control. And that brings us to the question of what is going on with Iran. Obviously, the Obama administration was very vehement in getting the Iran nuclear deal. It was one of their keystones. It was supported by Joe Biden adamantly. And we have to ask the question, how is that going forward? It's something that the Trump administration walked away from and imposed severe sanctions against Iran to stop their continued efforts at global terrorism and development of intercontinental ballistic missiles that would allow both Israel, Europe, and the United States to be endangered by Iran's desire to kill any organization, any country, any group that does not believe its very specific view of Islam. Well, looking back again, back in time, and this time going to July of 2016, we are talking about the Iran nuclear deal and what Iran might do with the massive inclusion and infusion of hundreds of billions of dollars of cash from the United States. It was admitted by then Secretary John Kerry on January 21st, 2016, in an interview with CNBC that, quote, "I think some of it, the funds that were released by the United States, will end up in the hands of the IRCG or other entities, some of which are labeled terrorists." In effect, John Kerry admitted that the United States, by providing Iran with hundreds of billions of dollars, is promoting global terrorism. Just 6 months after disclosing that the Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRCG, and other terror groups will benefit directly from the Iran nuclear deal, then Secretary Kerry boasted, "As of today, 1 year later, a program that some people said will not work, a program that people said is absolutely doomed to see cheating and being broken and will make the world more dangerous, has in fact made the world safer, lived up to its expectations, and thus far produced an ability to create peaceful nuclear programs with Iran." Now, this flies in the face of his earlier statement that, in fact, the United States had funded global terrorism and that Iran, the world leading exporter of terrorism, was using those funds. And it also invalidates or ignores a concern from then CIA Director John Brennan. It was John Brennan who said in September 2015 that a mile-wide loophole existed in the Iran nuclear deal. Quote, "Kerry and crew left a loophole a mile wide when they effectively allowed Iran to conduct all the illicit work it wants outside of Iran in countries like North Korea or perhaps the Sudan." So what the then CIA director was identifying is all Iran had to do was export its nuclear development programs to North Korea, a nation that does have nuclear weapons and is also working on intercontinental ballistic missiles, to then advance themselves, and doing so with even more cash than they had ever had before, or more recently had, and also being able to fund the development of both nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles with North Korea, thus increasing the threat from two nations that have a decidedly negative outlook on the United States. This is a problem. It was further followed up in 2016 with an understanding of what was going on in Syria itself. And at the time, we had talked in July of 2015 about several of the organizations in Syria that the United States was supporting. In particular, one of them being the Kurdistan Workers' Party, also known as the PKK, an organization that is considered to be a terrorist group by Turkey, one of America's allies, and is involved in the fighting in Syria. Also, there are the Syrian Kurds, who are very pro-America due to the actions of President Bush. And the People's Protection Units, or the YPG, is a outcropping of that Syrian Kurd support, and they are connected to the PKK, Turkish individuals considered to be terrorists by Turkey. And we mentioned at the time, quote, the Obama administration in October 2015 scrapped its plan to directly train Syrian rebels as frontline ground troops to fight ISIS and Prime Minister Assad's forces. The program had cost $560 million and only created 60 troops, many of which abandoned fighting and surrendered supplies to ISIS directly. In response, the Obama administration embarked in a new plan of supporting existing anti-Assad organizations, which includes the YPG in Turkey, a terrorist organization. This support of the YPG and potentially the PKK has raised tensions with Turkey. According to the report by Amnesty International, October 13, 2015, the YPG has conducted, quote, forced displacement and unlawful demolitions, end quote, of civilians. Amnesty International believes this is a violation of international humanitarian law. Let's pause for a second. What we see from the Obama administration has consistently been missteps in their international policy dealing with the Middle East, especially in regards to Iran and Syria. The United States has supported organizations that are considered to be terrorist groups. We have directly funded the world-leading global terrorist organization in Iran. And we have enabled those groups and individuals supporting those groups to be able to advance in nuclear weapons, chemical weapons, and ballistic missile systems that endanger our ally, our greatest ally in the Middle East, Israel, as well as the United States and Europe themselves. This was further complicated by the fact that the Obama administration was reticent, was hands-off in supporting pro-democratic movements in Iran and as well as the rest of the Middle East, something known as the Green Movement in Iran. And in fact, we were so hands-off that that movement failed while President Obama was in power and Joe Biden was his vice president. And then we saw that in 2020, this came back to America. And we saw that, as we stated in January of 2020,
thing that's happened before under President Obama. I think it was 2015 with the Green Movement during the Arab Spring. And at that time, President Obama ignored them completely. The movement failed, and we have the continuation of the current regime of Tehran with the Ayatollah. What has happened now, though, is that these very same people, many of them from the same Green Movement, that are looking for democracy in Iran, have come out and they have praised President Trump for standing up to the Ayatollah. They have renewed strength and energy in trying to get democracy in their nation. And this is a great thing. Now, Iran, for its part, the government of Iran, the Ayatollah, has decided that the answer to this is shoot people. And they have the government, the police, have been reported to have shot protesters in Iran and Tehran and several of the cities to stop people from protesting, which is horrendous. President Trump, for his own part, has said to Iran, it's great that you're not attacking Americans, and you better not attack Americans, but also stop attacking your own people. So he is doing more than what we've seen from President Obama in the Green Movement by actually addressing the fact that there are Iranians who want democracy and not the global terror that is, and when I say global terror, supporters of global terror that Iran has done.
Again, in January 2020, just before the global pandemic that is known as COVID-19, the United States was supporting democracy in Iran and those elements that wanted to advance that movement. And Iran shut that down by trying to kill those individuals, killing its own people. We heard no outrage from the Democrats. We heard no outrage from Joe Biden in regards to this, nor was there any support offered by the Democratic Party or Joe Biden on trying to increase the democracy in Iran. But we have heard that since the election with Joe Biden, Iran has been very happy and very eager to see Joe Biden return to the Iran nuclear deal, to remove the sanctions against Iran, even as they kill their own people, to be able to re-engage with their funding and allow them to continue to push global terror as they promise through their Ayatollah and their government to destroy America, Israel, and every other nation that does not believe in its religious beliefs like Iran does. That should terrify a lot of people. And we are wondering, what is it? What is the approach that we are going to see? Where is Joe Biden going? Well, again, in 2020, from Al Jazeera, we see that experts say the new policy approach of Biden will include more pressure on Saudi Arabia and Egypt over human rights, a mission to revive the 2015 Iran nuclear deal, and a relaunch of attempts with less concession for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to bring Palestinians and Israeli officials back to the negotiating table. Now, this is very important. To put more pressure on Saudi Arabia. The only way that the United States can put more pressure on Saudi Arabia is to either continue to fund the YPG or the PPK, the terrorist organizations found in Syria that are also a problem a problem of terror for Turkey, or to involve the U.S. troops more actively, or to directly try to use drones to fight in that civil war. The human rights issue is we've actually supported things that have created more human rights issues than have resolved them in the Middle East under the Obama administration. And it seems experts, according to Al Jazeera, in November of 2020, believe that that is where we're going back to. In fact, one of the key people involved in the Biden administration who has been targeted to deal with the Middle East, Antony Blinken, stated that Biden would seek to build on the nuclear deal and to make it longer and stronger if Iran returns to strict compliance. The problem with that is, while we saw some compliance from Iran on the nuclear deal as best as we could understand, what we also saw was an increase in global terrorism, which was funded by the Iran nuclear deal. And it also allowed Iran to continue to build ballistic missiles, something that even John Brennan, the former CIA head and a supporter of Obama, pointed out. This is a problem. This is a very big problem. In fact, we saw that Mr. Blinken had further things to mention about this. Mr. Blinken, in speaking about the Obama administration and the international policy it had for the Middle East, stated, quote, "We failed to prevent a horrific loss of life. We failed to prevent massive displacement of people internally in Syria, and, of course, externally as refugees," as he spoke to CBS News in May. Obama had said that the use of chemical weapons by Syrian President Bashar al-Assad would be a red line. But when Assad used sarin gas, he never retaliated. This is being quoted by the Syrian Observer as well as CBS News that the Obama administration's international policy dealing with Syria was a complete failure. It did not succeed. And yet, we are also hearing that Biden and the Biden administration are looking to return to the Obama policies in the Middle East. This is troubling. This is very troubling when we see that Joe Biden is an individual, as you can see here, that has some issues. Kind of troubling that the leader of the United States is someone who, rather than saluting Marines, says salute the Marines as if that was something he was told. It does not instill confidence. And this is something that is very important because Syria, the Middle East, Iran, China, Russia are all paying attention and trying to understand, is the United States strong enough to take a position and to help grow the peace that the Trump administration has been able to put forth? And that is something that we're not exactly sure of. Again, going to Newsweek, in how did Syria respond to both that message that we just saw of Joe Biden not being able to salute Marines, but rather to say that he should salute Marines, and his policy about Syria? Well, on the inauguration day, on January 20th, Syria made this statement from its officials at the UN. Quote, "The new U.S. administration must stop acts of aggression and occupation, plundering the wealth of my country, withdraw its occupying forces from it, and stop supporting separatist militias, illegal entities, and attempt to threaten Syria's sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity." This is a comment that was being made by the Syria United Nations representative Bashar al-Jafari in the United Nations, as reported by Newsweek magazine. And this was reported on January 20th at 3 p.m. at the same time that Joe Biden was being inaugurated. So we can take from that that Syria does not believe that Joe Biden has a positive intention, that he is looking to be more aggressive, that he is looking to involve the United States more deeply in the Syrian civil war. This is a problem. This is a very big problem for the United States. As many people, the BBC also has commented on this. The BBC states, quote, "If you look at the Biden appointees for foreign policy, nuclear disarmament, and treasury positions, so many had a direct hand in the nuclear talks of the implementation of the deal," notes Eli Geramahe, I apologize for mispronouncing that last name, Deputy Director of the Middle East and North Africa Program at the European Council on Foreign Relations. Quote, the Biden camp and Iranian leaders seem to be overlapping on one thing: the need to bring all sides back into full compliance with the nuclear deal, and they'll need to move swiftly to discuss how to sequence this, she emphasized. This is a question, and this is something that the BBC was highlighting back on, or today, about 16 hours ago, that the United States must have a coherent international policy in dealing with Iran, in dealing with Syria, in dealing with the Middle East. But we have to take into context that the Middle East has become more peaceful under President Trump than it was under President Obama or any president prior. That there were less incursions, less military force, less drone strikes than what had happened previously. and there was more peace and more peace deals. In fact, this is why President Trump has been nominated twice for a Nobel Peace Prize, though that was not mentioned by the news media in America very much. So we know that the Biden appointees were the people involved in 2016 who were involved under the Obama administration that increased the net global terror in the world, that they were the same appointees that involved America directly with troops and fighting a Syrian civil war, that enabled terrorist organizations, the PPK, that have attacked our allies in Turkey, that we have wasted $500 million to give supplies to ISIS and to Al-Qaeda, two organizations that under the Trump administration have been virtually wiped out. And what we know, again, from looking at yet another source, in the Middle East, we see from the organization Middle East Eye, Syria's UN ambassador calls on U.S. to withdraw troops, stop acts of aggression, and further we see the quote, the statement, quote, Biden would recommit to standing with civil society and pro-democracy partners on the ground. He will ensure U.S. is leading the global coalition to defeat ISIS and use what leverage we have in the region to help shape a political settlement to give more Syrians a voice. This statement being made by the Biden campaign's foreign policy means the United States is getting involved in the Syrian civil war, a war that has nothing to do with the United States, that the United States will be trying to guide the Syrian government and its various factions, that the United States will be on the ground. This is a problem. This is a major problem. And we see that this is further backed up by a convoy, as reported by I-24 News, Israeli 24 News. A convoy of 40 trucks and armored vehicles have entered Syria from Iraq. Further, at the same time, there are reports that some 200 U.S. troops have arrived in the Hasakeh province on helicopters. So already, in just the first 2 days of the Biden administration, we have seen the Biden administration indicate that America will become more actively involved in the Syrian civil war conflict. We have seen that they are moving troops into Syria from Iraq, that we are becoming more aggressive and more hands-on, that we are looking to continue to fund global terrorism with Iran and to remove sanctions limiting the ability of Iran to support global terrorism around the world. At the same time, there is no mention on what the United States will do with North Korea and its saber-rattling about its nuclear weapons. We are deeply troubled by this muddled, confusing mess. We hope that this has given some context for the American people to see what was the Obama administration's admittedly failed attempts at Middle East peace process and to reduce war in the Middle East, something that the Biden administration's top pick has admitted was a complete failure. And yet we see the Biden administration going forward and doing the exact same things, that they have learned nothing from the failures that have taken place, that we saw the Obama administration policy on the Middle East completely fail, endanger civilians, increase the amount of war in the world, to create greater conflict, and to involve America more deeply, both financially and with our troops. And these are the very steps that the Biden administration is following lockstep in and moving further. We believe that in the next coming days, likely in the next 3 months, we will see Joe Biden advance and add more troops to the Syrian conflict, that we will see more troops in Afghanistan, and that because of the bungling of the Biden administration and the Obama administration before it, that we will see more enabling of ISIS, the PKK, and other terrorist organizations, partially supported by Iran and its enabling of global terrorism around the world. This is troubling. And we hope that the Biden administration and Democrats in Congress will realize and recognize these failures and not take these actions to change their course. We hope this will happen. We doubt it will happen. But perhaps you may say, Mike, you've missed some of the critical issues here, that perhaps we have not understood the ramifications of the things we have presented to you, that perhaps there is something else that has happened, something that has changed in the Biden administration outlook. We look forward to hearing your comments about that. We hope that this has brought you up to date on what is going on in the international policy and Middle East policy for the United States. We look forward to seeing you on Sunday at 2:30 Eastern Standard Time. And if you have liked this information, if this has been helpful for you, please do support us by share, and subscribing to allow others to see this information and to draw their own conclusions as well. We look forward to seeing your comments, and we hope that you will be well.